Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. I'm Megan.
And I'm Sierra. Today we are going to be doing a video about how to start a podcast for beginners from your very own home. So odds are if you're clicking on this video, you want to start a podcast, which isn't surprising given how they've grown in popularity, not over just like the last few years, but like especially during quarantine.
So me and Sierra started our podcast according to just over a year ago, so we've been doing it for a while, and we just wanted to tell you guys kind of how we got started with our podcast and how we were able to get pretty good quality with audio with relatively inexpensive items.
So the very first thing you want to do when you're thinking of what to do for your podcast is think of like what do you want the concept and overall niche of your podcast to be.
So you need to start coming up with name ideas, and that's probably one of the hardest things because you want it to be something that sticks out, you want it to be unique to you, but it's really hard to think of a unique name. Sierra and I actually found ours through like a name generator where I was like putting in random things that were like twin related or like talking related because I knew that was like some things that our podcast was going to be about.
We just wanted our podcast to be like us like talking to each other about random things in our life. It wasn't really anything like super niche, but I think that's also pretty common, just like having a podcast where you're talking with someone. The other thing to keep in mind is, do you want your podcast to just be you talking to the microphone? Do you want it to be you and a co-host? That's what our podcast is. Or do you want to interview someone like every single episode?
Another thing that's important towards the beginning of your podcast is creating cover art that's aesthetically pleasing, finding what your brand is within your podcast, and so you can start creating like an Instagram account because the podcast world is not very like social, it's pretty like one-sided.
Yeah.
So you're going to probably want to make an Instagram, maybe also like a Facebook page or Twitter, whatever you feel like is a good fit for your podcast.
You want to be able to engage with your audience, and you can't really do that like on podcasting platforms alone, so that's why it's important to build your brand on other social media so people can actually interact. And that's also where you can kind of like, again, showcase your brand and showcase what your aesthetic is. I'll pop our Instagram up on the screen. It's pretty like colorful, but like also kind of muted, and just like we like to have fun, so that's kind of what our aesthetic is representing.
You can also choose to hire graphic designers if you don't feel comfortable making cover art or working on your Instagram page by yourself. We've been doing everything on our own. We just kind of like chose our podcast cover art like a year ago.
Yeah,
like
we
messing around with
to make it.
And we like it so far, and we've stuck with it for a year, and we feel like it fits our brand pretty well. A lot of people like to do illustrations for their podcast cover art, so if that's not something you're comfortable doing, you definitely would have to spend the money up front to get the cover art to be what you want. I also feel like try not to have your podcast cover art look just like every single other platform. If it's okay to get inspiration from podcasts that you think are in a similar niche to what you are, because then it's going to draw the attention of the same audience, but you still want it to stand out and like so people know it's a different brand and you're not just like copying someone else.
I would say podcast art is very, very important because that's like literally the only thing you have to go off of if you've never heard of the podcast before. So if it looks like bad cover art, you're not going to want to click on it and listen to it because it's not like aesthetically pleasing, it's not drawing you in. So if you don't feel comfortable doing any of your design work yourself, you can always reach out to a friend or like I think local community colleges, or just like if you're in school, reach out to someone in the graphic design department and they might be able to do one for you relatively inexpensive. Otherwise, we used Upwork sometimes, not for our cover art, but just for other things we've done in the past, and there's a ton of graphic designers on there that would love to help you out. Alright, so you've got your podcast idea figured out, you have your name, you got your aesthetic and your brand all figured out, you've made your Instagram, so it's time to start recording. We're going to show you guys the equipment that we've used over the years, and like we've pretty much stuck with this stuff for the entire year, and I don't know, like we might upgrade eventually, but for just getting started,
this
is pretty good. So we have the Blue Yeti microphone. I don't know if there's any specific name other than that because Megan bought it.
That's the name.
So this one I think is really popular for not only like I think YouTubers use it for just recording narrations and stuff, but like this is a pretty solid, like inexpensive starting out podcast microphone. How much was it?
It was around $100. I'm pretty sure that's what we paid for it. And at first, I will say I bought one on Amazon first, and then it didn't work. Like it just was broken, and so I had to get this one from Best Buy. So fair warning if you're ordering from Amazon.
So the good thing about the Blue Yeti is that you can adjust the gain on the mic, and then also there's different settings for if you're recording two people on opposite sides of the microphone or if you're just recording by yourself, so you can find what best works.
So when me and Sierra are recording our podcast, we simply put it on the two-person setting, and then we sit on opposite sides of each other, and that way it's picking up audio from this side of the mic, and then it's picking up audio on the other side of the mic, and it's trying to not pick up noise from the other sides where no one is at, just so it can really tune in on the voices when we're speaking. So the Blue Yeti mic is a USB microphone that you simply plug into your laptop, and since depending on the type of laptop you have, you might have to get an adapter to get it to hook up to your laptop. And I will say that for most of the time we've had our podcast, we were using a separate adapter that we it's honestly, the adapter sucks, like the other kind we had.
I'll pop up a picture of like the adapter we were using, but
and
it was just
we didn't know any different. But when we got this, because we thought we lost the adapter, we got like a different, better kind of adapter. And in my opinion, maybe it's just me, but I feel like this adapter made the quality sound better from the same microphone, and I think it's just because it hooks up better to the computer. Maybe I'm making that up, but if you're getting an adapter, I would suggest this one and not the other one.
Alright, the next thing you're going to need are some headphones. These are just like, you really only need like earbuds, like you don't have to buy anything fancy, but I think when you're in the podcasting world, you like to put on the overhead headphones and just like get in the zone and like feel comfortable. You really truly don't need this. Like sometimes we record without wearing headphones, so it's not necessary, but it does help you kind of like get into the podcasting zone so you can hear your audio.
It's also helpful to wear headphones just because then you're actually hearing what the audio sounds like, and if there's any issues, you're usually going to be able to pick that up on the headphones. However, I wouldn't necessarily suggest these particular headphones because they have not been working for us well at all, so we've stopped using headphones. And I actually don't mind not recording with headphones, but you are kind of taking the risk of potentially having like mess ups somewhere, or like we've had some issues with the Blue Yeti with like random like buzzing stuff. Not a lot, it happens like very randomly and sporadically, but it does happen sometimes.
So that's where it'd be good to have headphones so you can actually like listen for that, because if you aren't wearing headphones, you won't know what it sounds like. So if you're going to have a co-host and you're recording together and you're using one microphone and you both want to hear the audio, you're going to need to get one of these like aux cord adapters. Basically, you plug the headphones in right here. This plugs into the microphone. You can both hear what you're listening to. So we want to kind of further dive into what you would set up for if you're recording by yourself with someone else or like interviewing someone. So what we do, we already kind of mentioned, we sit across from each other, and that's how we record our podcast episodes.
Usually if you're going to have a co-host and you're not recording together, you're going to each have your own microphone separately so that you each have good audio, and then you're going to record on something like GarageBand or whatever other software you're using, and you're going to record that at the same time, and then you can video call the person so that you're still like talking to each other, but you have separate audio files. Again, making sure that you're wearing headphones so that you can't like have any crossover between your audio sounds, but then usually that can be edited together later. There's also some softwares or websites that you can use that will allow both of you to record on the same time, but I've heard some mixed reviews on those, so I think that recording separate audio files and then putting them together is the best thing to do, and that is what I would recommend.
So now we can start talking about what you do if you want to interview someone. We've just kind of started getting to like the realm of interviewing people, so this probably isn't like the 100% perfect way to do it. I would say if you could, like honestly, do the setup that people do when they have a podcast host that is not in the same area as them, because that way if two people have microphones and you can record like that, I think that is the best thing to do. But obviously the odds of your guest having a microphone is not very good. The best thing that you can do then is record your audio on your microphone and GarageBand or wherever you want to record it, and then also you can either Zoom them, FaceTime them, whenever you're getting in contact with them, and then on Zoom you can record your entire interview through there. So like that's what we did when we were doing some interviews, and that worked pretty well. I actually think that people are used to kind of having like lower quality when they have a guest on, so I wouldn't let that like hold you back from having a guest on.
Even like when we were doing our Zoom, we had our microphone on as like our mic that we were using, and the quality was like fine, but it still is like worse than normal, so we started messing around with what we could in theory do to make sure that both ourselves and our guests in the future have like really good audio. And what we decided was a good idea to try in the future, and we did a little test run on ourselves and it worked really well, was we have our microphone, we decided to record on like GarageBand, that's what we use to record our audio on, and so like we would open it up and then we'd call a guest on Zoom or whatever video calling thing works, and then have them record separately on like their iPhone, because iPhones have, or I'm sure Android phones too, have like the voice memos app. And the audio is actually pretty good on that, and like they just set it so that the microphone's facing them. They can set it on the counter or like maybe up towards their mouth, and then they could send that audio file to you. If it's too big, then you can use a website like WeTransfer to send larger files for free, and then you could cut the audio files together, and it would be good audio from us for our microphone and good audio from them from their phone.
Alright, so now that you've recorded your audio, it's time to talk about how to edit it. So we use GarageBand, we've already mentioned that before. I personally think that just like it's simple enough and
well, honestly, I don't love GarageBand, but I think that editing on Final Cut Pro is still almost more annoying, even though we know how to use it more, just because I don't want to record in Final Cut Pro because I feel like the audio is so much quieter. Like we had to do that at one point, and I just didn't like that, so I like recording in GarageBand because I think the audio sounds better. It just means you have to kind of like get over the weird editing differences between Final Cut Pro and GarageBand, but it usually is not too bad for simple things that we do, which is just like cutting out parts where you mess up or things like that.
Other things that you could do would be use Audacity or Final Cut Pro Windows Movie Maker or whatever the equivalent on a PC is now, or iMovie, you can use any of that. And then if you're using a video editing software, you would just save it as the audio only file.
You could also choose to have a little intro music or music that you play throughout just very quietly. I personally like podcasts that just have like no extra music underneath, especially during like the main episode. But if you're inserting ads and you want to like differentiate that by putting music underneath, I think that's fine. But I just like having just talking.
Yeah, but if you're going to do that, I would look for something that's royalty free so you don't get in trouble with copyright later down the line. Last thing I want to mention about recording is to mention where you should record, because Megan and I found out the hard way that recording in a large room with not a lot of cushions and like soft things can give you some echo in your audio, and we recorded an entire episode and did not realize that until after the fact, and then we ended up putting it up anyways because we thought the episode was good.
And we tried to figure out if there was anything like setting wise that was causing the echo, but it ended up being fine like the next time we recorded. So we like, just to be safe, make sure that you're in a space that's like kind of small.
Curtains, bedspreads, clothes, just like anything to help like absorb the noise.
Room.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to record in a room where there's like a lot of echoes and stuff because your podcast will pick that up. Alright, so now you have your audio file. It's time to figure out how to get it out to all the podcasting hosting platforms. So first you need to find, in our opinion, you can do this yourself, but I really recommend you find a podcast hosting website. So there is Buzzsprout is one that we use, and we use Anchor currently. I would recommend Anchor over Buzzsprout because you don't have to pay for Anchor, and you can also get a free ad, so you can get paid for that.
So we chose Buzzsprout at first just because it was the one that I was seeing most often, and I feel like Anchor is relatively new. I didn't see it at all when I was looking at places to host it first, so we chose Buzzsprout. You have to pay a certain amount a month based on how much you're uploading, and so we're usually paying anywhere from like $12 to $16 a month, which isn't bad. But we ended up switching, and it's a good hosting website. We didn't have any issues with them. It's really easy to sign up for the other places you want your podcast to be available, but we did end up switching to Anchor because we had someone actually reach out to us that works with Anchor, just like suggesting that we switch over to their site, and I was like, it's free. I know now a couple other podcasts that use it to host, and so I was like, let's do it. And now it's completely free for us to host on there. They even do offer ads for anyone that signs up for Anchor to like record an ad for Anchor, and then you can put it in your podcast. It's only like a short running ad, or like you can only do it until you get like a certain threshold of earnings, but it's money nonetheless for anyone.
The other good thing that I like about Anchor is that you can record on the website if you want to, so if you don't want to mess with like GarageBand or any of those other things, you can record directly on the website. You can also have people send in audio messages, and like it just has a good setup as far as like splitting up where you want your ads to go if you have any in your podcast. So that's why I've been enjoying it. So also just to like make you guys aware of like what Anchor or Buzzsprout does, you upload your audio file to those websites, and it has like analytics and stuff for you about your podcast, but also puts it like on every other podcasting like platform. So it puts
you
on
have
Spotify,
to sign up for those places you want it distributed. So when we signed up for Buzzsprout originally, we like made our account, how our like podcast started, and it was like, okay, now you have to like go sign up for Apple Podcasts. Was like the most difficult one because it takes just like a longer period of time to get approved, and I'm also pretty sure you have to have an episode available because it wasn't working when I was trying to do it, because I was like, well, we haven't gone live yet, but I still want it to be like on Apple Podcasts when we start, but they wouldn't approve it until we had something up. So we uploaded like a test-ish like episode just to have something up, and that allowed us to get approved, and then we deleted the episode and we were still on Apple Podcasts. And then you can sign up for, there's a couple ones you have to sign up for, but then like when you sign up for Apple Podcasts, it like automatically puts you on like a couple different sites. So like when you're going through the websites, it should make it like understandable like where you're available and where you're not. I know that on Anchor, I'm pretty sure it says like literally what we have our podcast on, so it like lets you know where you are and where you aren't.
Alright, so your podcast is out there, it's ready for everyone to listen to. So how do you get people to start listening to your podcast? Obviously, Megan and I are not dumb. We are aware of the fact that like having a platform across other social medias helped our podcast grow. So if you have like no YouTube channels, no large Instagram following, you genuinely do have to start like with your own people that you're friends and family with. So.
Even if it makes you uncomfortable to start like making the transition of like just being like not a social media type person to now being like, oh, I'm trying to like encourage people to go listen to my podcast, and so like that might feel weird, but like that's one of your only places that you have to start promoting yourself, and it's free. And if you like your podcast, you should still be encouraging other people, even if they know you, to go listen to it. So start there, but then you can make a separate podcast Instagram and try building that up, and people might follow it. If you follow other podcast accounts, there's always the possibility that maybe they would follow you back, or that other people would scroll through and find your podcast that way.
Hashtags like related to what your podcast talks about. So if people are like if you have a photography podcast, like hashtagging photography and like photography related hashtags, so people are looking through it and they find your podcast through that, it's something they're actually interested in and might listen to. You can also get in contact with podcasts that are similar to you and try and do like a little like shout out for shout out type of thing, either on your Instagrams or in the podcasts themselves. You can also just like reach out to podcasts and like offer to pay as if like, you know, you're an ad pretty much, and say like, I'll pay you X amount of money if you like shout out my podcast, say what it's about, give them like a little list of like bullet points to like say, and then you're just like a person paying for an ad, so like they get money from doing an ad, but then you're also getting some listeners from that.
Make sure when you're reaching out to other podcasts that you're actually trying to find similar in size podcasts. Even if you're just starting, try and find some of those smaller podcasts so it's more likely that you're going to get a response.
I think we've mentioned this a few times already, but you want to create a community with everyone who's listening to your podcast so they actually feel like they're part of something. I think Megan and I have done a really good job of that so far, because in general, like our like followers on our podcast is pretty equivalent to like the amount of listens that we get per episode.
Yeah.
So I think we have like a pretty good 1-to-1 ratio of like listeners to followers, and that's what you want to do, because you want your followers to engage with other people who are listening and to help you out with future episode ideas and give you feedback on what your episodes are like.
And lastly, make sure that you're patient. If you're wanting to start a podcast, I would highly recommend doing the practice runs, having a list of ideas. You want to make sure that it's going to be something you can do long term and not just something that sounded good 5 minutes ago and now you want to start doing a podcast, because the setup especially is a lot of work. You don't want to invest money in a microphone and do all of that and just realize like, just kidding, I don't want to do that. Make sure that you actually have a set plan and you're willing to kind of like go down the long haul of trying to build up your platform and just improve your podcast every week.
Also, something that Megan and I did not realize when we first started was that podcasts like take a while to build up like the like, verbal stamina of like doing an hour of talking, because Megan and I like don't talk for an hour straight usually, and so you see these like podcast videos of people doing their podcast live and it seems like there's no cuts or anything, and I'm just like, it is surprisingly hard to talk for an hour straight without messing up,
especially when you're first starting. So
like do some practice runs.
We literally did like 2 or 3 practice episodes that never even saw the light of day because like they just were not good. So don't just like put out your first episode if you're not happy with it. Re-record. It could be even like the same idea, as long as you don't get sick of talking about it and it can still be genuine. But like just keep practicing at talking it to the camera. I mean microphone. I'm clearly talking to a camera right now.
Also, you have to be patient with the amount of listens you're getting, because it's going to take a while for people to start like listening to your podcast, especially if you don't have like a large platform to promote it from in the first place.
And the podcast app does not really help that much to promote other podcasts. It's not like YouTube where they can be like promoting creators and they just like blow up. It's really hard to do that when you're a podcast.
So make sure you put yourself in the right category for podcasts. We're in like the fashion and beauty realm. Not necessarily that our podcast is fashion and beauty, but I think that a lot of just like young girls put their podcasts in that, and that's where they kind of like fall into. So it's hard to figure out like the best category, but if you don't feel like you're gaining traction in one area, try changing it around to something that's also related and see if that helps you. So those are all of our tips for how to start a podcast for beginners. We hope you guys found this helpful. Hopefully if you're starting a podcast, like you can comment down below and like you guys can like see if you want to listen to those podcasts.
Make sure you guys go listen to our podcast called According To. We post every Thursday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, and the types of episodes that we do are usually like, some of them are like school related, some of them are just us analyzing the internet. We really like to go on like subreddits and look at unpopular opinions,
do some online quizzes,
stuff like that. So we kind of do like a wide variety of things, and we think that it's pretty fun, so you guys should go check it out.
If you guys like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.
And we will see you guys in our next video.
Bye!